guys, welcome back into my studio. So this is going to be episode 7 in our draw along series. So far, as I sort of taught you through in every video, in the last one what we did was sort of, I think, just touch up a little bit above this guy's eye and then sort of work our way down onto the nose. Now all of this isn't quite complete yet. I still have to go in, touch up the highlights, make things brighter, and push a few darks around, things like that. But what I'm going to do in this one, I'm going to do all that really at the end. So in this one we're going to sort of look at working down onto the rest of this guy's face here and finishing off sort of all this fur, and then all we need to do then is the nose, this other eye, and then just this little bit of cheek sticking out here. But I feel like I've been doing sort of the blurred out details for quite a while now, so I wanted to get stuck into something that had a little bit more texture to it just on these this next video. Hopefully there shouldn't be too many more in this series. I think probably just this one and one more, depending on if I can get it all finished. Hopefully I can. So we're going to start again just by slowly working our way into the drawing. You know, not rushing too quickly, just slowly getting a hang of where we were. So I'm using my Magnum tattoo needle, just because on this area, the area that we're working on is just sort of round here, and all that is going to give us a little bit more fur texture than using, let's just say, one of my round liners or the X-Acto knife. So I've pretty much done most of it as we come up here, so it's just working on those not so bright areas. So there's quite a lot of black underneath poking its way through this fur that I'm working on, so I'm going to try and make sure not to cover up all aspects of the board, because that way it's going to give that impression that there is that darker shadow underneath. Now the only thing I find with this tattoo needle is this one can tend to go a little bit blunt, a little bit quicker than what some of the others can. Some of the others tend to last me a while, whereas this one ends up getting blunt after just a few hours really. So I've stocked up on these ones, but it's already feeling like it's coming to a bit of an end really. So again, luckily when I did my line art, I made a lot of detail as to where these fur strokes are going. Just have to try and catch it in the right light. So I tend to use like a black carbon graphite paper when I do my transfers. I don't really use the white one. I did in my earlier pieces, like the very first tiger that I did, and the zebra that I did. But what I found was it was quite hard to get rid of the white lines that were showing through, and I didn't like that. I liked it to be easily hidden, easily covered up if I couldn't get rid of all the lines. So that's why I made the switch to graphite. And it is a bit hard to see. It's not the easiest thing to work with. You do have to get it in a certain lighting, but once you've done that, it's not too bad. It works quite well. All I'm doing at the minute is just trying to plot in where things are going to go, trying to make sure that the fur is going in the right direction. Not too worried about brightness at this point, because I'm going to be going back in and over this quite a few times, so I can make things a lot brighter if I need to. I'm just sort of giving the outline to this nose a bit of shape. And like I say, the fur around this area is quite complex. Does a lot of different changes in direction, so that's something that you need to make sure you keep an eye on. It's quite different when you suddenly start working on an area that's got a fair bit of detail compared to, let's say, up there where you're just sort of blocking in the tones. But this is where these tattoo needles really come into their own, because they're spaced so wide apart, and there's sort of 5 needles in here, but in a staggered formation, so there's 4 on the bottom and then 3 resting on top. You get a nice random fur texture when you're putting down your lines. You know, and just because I use these tools doesn't mean you have to use them. You get the same technique and the same effect really from using a single tattoo needle or the X-Acto knife. I just find by having a few different tools available, it makes it a little bit easier for me. It's just having something extra in your arsenal to give you a different texture. You don't have to work too hard to get it. I'm trying to plot out where this dark area sort of goes. Obviously just further up it's quite light, and just a little bit below it's quite light, so I'm just trying to work out where exactly that area is. So by working on the different areas surrounding it, you can sort of plan your way to it. I think this is what takes the most time as well, trying to plot out where things are and get things in the right place, and sort of changes in direction in the right place as well, because you don't want it to look odd. And if you need to darken things down, when you do scratch, you sometimes leave a little bit of dust just on the surface of the board. So I use my finger, the end of my finger, I don't know if you can see it on camera, but it's a little bit dirty from where I've just rubbed. And what that does is it pushes some of the India ink dust back in to the board, and so it darkens up the marks you've just done. Now that only really works if you haven't already blown the dust away. So that's why I only ever blow it away once I know that I don't want to sort of necessarily go back in and make it even darker. So this area that I've left here as a strip is sort of this area that's working along here. So I might start filling out this this bottom one, this one that's just below it, just because that's a brighter area, and I can start getting other things then mapped in. Like I say, on these aspects, the fur doesn't need to be exact. You know, I'm not looking to get every single individual fur stroke in. You know, I don't want it to be an exact replica. I want it to be, you know, pretty accurate in regards to, you know, I've got this area down here that's in the same place, the same style, the same brightness as in the drawing, but I don't necessarily want every single fur stroke that's on the picture to match up directly with it. And that's just personal preference. You know, if you feel you can do that or you want to do that, then that's absolutely fine. It's just if I was going to do that, I'd be spending hours on this. I say hours, I've pretty much spent quite a few hours on it already. But I'd be spending, you know, it'd be weeks of work. And a lot of the time, if you just have the general impression of what you want to sort of say with the piece, that's sort of enough for me a lot of the time. So it's quite easy to get lost in this area. You know, you get into the habit of just, you know, putting down fur strokes, and all of a sudden you filled out a whole area that wasn't meant to be filled out. So take your time. Make sure you're getting things roughly in the right place. You know, what I'm being careful is I don't want to cover up where these black sort of spots where the whiskers are going to come out. I'm trying to plan in where they're going to be. Again, I'm just rubbing my finger on that board just to try and knock it back a little bit, because I can always come in and make things brighter. I find, you know, if you ever want to make something a bit brighter, it's a lot easier than trying to darken things up. You have a couple of options if you want to darken things up. You know, you can use touch-up ink or watered down India ink. And that just that can sort of put a layer of ink just over the top of what you've done, and that can help knock things back a bit. Another aspect you can do is go around and make everything else around it even brighter, and that will give the illusion that the area you've gone too bright on is actually darker than what it is. That's a little bit more risky, because then, you know, you have this, you can have an ability to make the whole thing look a little bit overexposed, if that makes sense. So all I'm trying to do now is just line up. So if you look on my drawing, so I'm trying to work out where this sort of little curve is of blackness, where it sort of joins the next row down. So all I'm sort of doing is putting a line upwards, so I can roughly sort of see if is there anything in line with that, and sort of this darkened area up here is roughly a straight line up from it, and we're on the right hand side of that, so roughly in about the right place, because I haven't actually put a mark down for that one. So then we know if we curve that down there, that's roughly where that's going to go. Like I say, it doesn't have to be absolutely exact, but it helps to get it roughly in the right place. like I say, I might have to change to another tattoo needle, just because this one's not giving me. I'm having to press quite hard to get the marks that I want, which is then causing me to maybe at times go a little bit too bright, so I'm having to do a lot of redarkening, which I don't really want to do. I won't look at throwing this needle away though, I'll probably keep it. I've said in a few of the other videos why. So sometimes if I want to just get, let's say, a little mark, one that I don't want to be too bright, it's quite hard to get that when you've got a very sharp brand new needle. And what you can sometimes do, like I say, is go too brightly. You have to press really, really light to get the effect that you want. So by keeping these older tattoo needles that have already been used and worn and are sort of on the edge of being thrown away, you can just grab one of these, and sometimes it can just be sort of just blunt enough to give you the mark that you want. You know, some days you'll have days where you're a little bit more heavy-handed than others. I have days where I'm too light, too scared of pushing, you know, too hard and getting too bright a mark. But then again, I have, like I say, other days where I do press too hard and I'm a bit more forceful with my strokes. So to have the ability just to change things up works quite well. And the way we're tackling this fur is exactly the same as what we've done on every other part of the drawing. So I'm putting in these lighter, less bright directional fur strokes, just so that I can plan the direction of everything, where everything's going. You know, the lines help me, but sort of the lines that are on my line art, but it helps just to have this as well. And then what we'll do is we'll come in, we'll add a slightly brighter layer above that, and then add our top highlights on at the very end. So just had to take my jacket off. I was getting way too hot underneath these lights. The joys of doing a live draw over is that I can't edit stuff like that out. You know, I want this to be a whole, I don't want to really do any editing on this video whatsoever. I want it to be quite a natural video. So normally if I stutter, or if I can't think of what I'm saying, or if I lose track of what I'm saying, I'd normally be able to edit all of that out, and you don't normally get to see any of that, but by doing this you do. So sometimes I'll ramble on, some days I'll forget what I'm saying, which I'm sure I have at some point. I'll take a minute to have a drink of coffee, but all of that will have to be included. So I think what I've ended up doing is missing out. So I've ended up coming along here, which is this black line here, and then I think I've messed up a little bit here from where I was meant to leave a little gap for that bit there, that little spot where the whiskers are going to come out. So what I'm going to do, just to make it easy, I'm just going to fill it all in. I think it's just about there that I was meant to do. So I've left the 1. Then all I'll do is I'll get my India ink. I've got a little palette here, and I like to do this a little bit as I go. I don't want it to be, you know, like an afterthought in case I forget. And this will be just straight India ink. You know, I'm not going to dilute this down at all. And all I'm going to do, if it comes out, there we go. I think it was just a bit dry. It's just 1 dot, you know, I don't want too much. And because this brush is quite frayed, I'm going to take a tiny bit and just add that blackness in. It may take a couple of layers before we get that spot on. And then I can touch up any areas that I think just needed darkening just while I've got the ink out. Then we'll just make sure that we don't work on that area for a little bit of time. We're going to let that area dry, so we'll just end up working over here. Sometimes I even find it's easier for little marks like that to put them in at the end with India ink or touch-up ink or a Faber-Castell pen, whatever it might be, just because it's quite confusing sometimes and you end up getting lost in a lot of this fur. So that's something you can also do if you don't want to map it out. Because the amount of, you know, lines that you get on your line art, for some people it can be quite confusing. They get a little bit lost in where they're going. And as you can see, even I get, causes me a little bit of a headache. Sometimes with how the light's hitting it, you can't see some of the lines with the graphite paper, but like I said, it's one of them. For me, the downfalls of that outweigh the benefits of using the graphite paper outweigh the pitfalls of it, really, compared to what I feel the lighter white transfer paper does. I'd rather go back in like that and add in a little bit of fur or darken an area up because I've missed it out, rather than have transfer lines showing the whole way through. So again, I think what I've decided to do is just to go and cover this whole area, and then what I'll do is I've got the India ink all set up ready, So then I'm going to go in and darken everything up. Like I said, I don't want to go too overboard. I'll let that area dry and then I'll come back to it. So as you can see now, I don't know if you can tell, but I'm putting marks down and it's taken a while for them to show up. I either have to press down hard or do quite a few layers to get them to show up. Now that's a sign that the tattoo needle's sort of nearing the end, so I'll need to look at changing this now, just because some of the marks that I'm getting, it's making it a little bit harder than what it should be. You know, I shouldn't have to be struggling like this to just get the marks to lay down. Sometimes in some of the areas where the board's been inked, you can have where I'd probably say the ink's just a little bit thicker, probably just due to the process of the actual manufacturing. I've had to scratch through multiple layers, or I've found that I've opened a board and the whole board's just a bit harder to scratch through, and that can be from, like I say, just the manufacturing process, but a lot of the time now I'm finding it's probably just because the tattoo needles are a little bit blunt. So I'm just going to get a new one of these ones out. So again, they come exactly the same as the other ones do, so just in this packet, but on this one you can see it's a 5M1, so the M1 stands for the fact that it's weaved, so one on top of the other like that, and the 5 is the amount of tattoo needles that are actually in there. So I'll put this one aside, this old one, just in case I need an area where, like I say, I need to go a little bit lighter. So now you have to try and trick your brain into going really light after you've been used to pressing down quite hard for a while. There you go. So I'm going really light with this now, and the marks are showing up really easy. So sometimes I put this cloth down as well to rest my hand on. I'd probably recommend this. It doesn't have to be anything special. This is just, it's just an old, I won't say the make of it, but it's just an old cloth. That's nice and soft, so it's not going to be abrasive on the board. And what that does is, some of this area up here that I've worked on is quite light, and when I've rested my hand on certain things, when I'm blowing dust off the board, if I'm resting my hand on my table, that dust will be picked up on my glove, and then what that can do is it can darken up all this area by resting my hand on that. So I just put that there, rest my hand on it, and then I don't have to worry about sort of re-darkening all that area that I've tried to get so bright, because you may not even notice until you come right to the end, and then you take a look at your board and think, that seemed a bit brighter than what it used to be, or that darker than what it used to be, and it's probably good just because you've lent on it. So most of that underfur is in now, so you can see how it's quite a lot darker than this area over here. So this is like your first layer that you're just going to put down. So obviously it needs lightening up in places. There's areas where it's going to need to stay just as dark as it is now. So this is now you've got that first layer of scratching down where you've just taken away that blackness. This now is where you need to be a little bit more careful, a little bit more deliberate in what you're doing. So this is where you're going to start comparing different areas of the board. So we can see that this area on the nose is probably just as bright as this area that's curving down underneath the nose. So we need to make sure that that's the same level of brightness. Before we do that, I'm just going to join these two areas together. There doesn't need to be a lot of detail in this bit. So we'll come back and we'll add a lot more detail in a bit, probably once we've got to the end, and we, if you notice and you think, oh, there needs to be a bit more detail in that bit, then you can come back in. But sometimes it's nice just to leave something not as detailed as the rest. So now I'm just going to work on sort of extending this area just a little bit, just because this comes to almost like a complete stop almost. So I'm just going to feather this one out and make the sort of highlight fade in, because I don't want it to look so harsh. So remember, this is a new blade that we've put on this one. So if you're finding that the marks that you're putting down are too bright, or you don't like how light you're having to be with it, don't be afraid to go back to your other one, because that's why we don't throw them away, we keep them. Just in case you want to go back if you think, oh, it wasn't quite ready to be changed just yet. like I say, the reason you don't want, the reason I don't try and get every single stroke in the exact right place, you know, I'm not trying to get every first stroke like I said earlier. You know, if this cat was, if someone took a photo of this cat 10 minutes later, the person taking the photo was in a slightly different position, all of that would make the fur move or appear to move. So it'd be in a slightly different place, it'd lay slightly differently. So, you know, unless you're doing a pet portrait and you want it to be exact, a lot of the time, as long as you've got the general impression of the fur, is, you know, it's in roughly the right place, going in roughly the right direction. You haven't got anything going completely the wrong way, or, you know, if this fur was going directly up, it'd look a bit weird. So that would be an issue. But most of the time, no one's going to know. Unless someone's seen this reference photo, you know, and can remember it exactly. So now this area around here should be dry, from what we've worked on earlier. So we should be able to go into that, it shouldn't be much of an issue. So what I'll look to do as well is create some flyaway hairs just on this bit, that just sort of tuck down onto this black area. It just gives it a little bit more realism. Not too many because I don't want to go overboard on it. And again, we're just slowly building up that brightness of this fur. And I find this is what makes your work have just that little bit more realism. It's the layers that you put down. So having more than just one layer, you know, having 2 or 3 layers of fur, it just gives that impression of depth. You know, it doesn't have to be, like say, tons and tons of layers, just a couple. Now I made the mistake of putting down my brand new one next to my not so new one. So I have no idea now which one of these two I was using. That one obviously feels a little bit blunt. I'll just stab myself with it. Yeah, it's this one. So always keep your needle separate as well, otherwise you'll have that issue. So what I'm doing now, instead of using my slice tool and X-Acto knife, I'm just pressing a bit harder with my tattoo needle, because I like the texture that this tattoo needle gives. It makes the fur look a little bit denser, and it then has that ability, if you press a little bit harder, it makes it brighter. Taking away a little bit more of that blackness that's underneath the fur, taking it away. Not all of it, like I said, because you want some of it showing through. Just a little bit of it. So like I say, this area, working around this is going to take a while, because you are slowly just plotting in things, lightening things, and it is one of the areas, like I say, like with the eye, like some other areas on this one, that you are going to want to take your time just a little bit. This is one of the sort of more main features of this picture. So it's going to be where the eye is drawn. So you're not going to want it to look rubbish, you're going to want it to look decent. I'm being really careful as we come up, you know, around this nose. I don't want to be really loose with my strokes and sort of going into where that nose is going to be. I don't quite know what texture. I'm probably going to use a stippling method for that, for the nose. So I don't really want to go overboard and end up putting lines in there that, you know, don't need to be there. If you have a look on the reference photo, there's not a lot of darker lines showing through around the area that I'm working on. There's a few, not too dark, they're just sort of those mid-tones. So I'm trying to cover up quite a bit of this this area and this with this brighter fur, because this is where the sun's or the light is hitting it in the picture. So this is one of the stages of the drawing that I tend to like the most, and it's when you've got, you know, quite a lot of it in. So you can sort of image now what the end result is going to look like. I'm not worrying, you know, is it going to look absolutely terrible? It probably doesn't look the best. It's not the best piece I've ever done, but I can see that it's starting to come along, and with a bit of work it'll look, you know, okay. Not every piece of work that you do is going to be a masterpiece, but I think we can all agree we're probably our own worst critics. So when I'm putting all these strokes down as well, they're not straight lines. They've all got a little bit of a curve to them. They're all crossing over a little bit, because rarely are you ever going to get fur that's sort of straight in lines. You know, unless you're looking at a dog that's been brushed, then a lot of the time the fur is going to be a little bit disheveled. And even when it is, you know, a dog that's been brushed, it's not, they're not just going to be laying exactly flat next to each other. Hard to control my my iPad when I've got gloves on. probably going to switch over to my more blunt X-Acto knife, so the blade that I've been using for quite some time, because I'm having to be really light with my strokes with that new one. And just when I get up here, I don't want to have to be that light, just in case I want the extra light, little bit of leeway where I can push a little bit harder. Like I keep saying, this is the reason why I don't tend to throw my blades away. I don't just like to hoard things. My wife might disagree with that though. She thinks I keep everything, so I think everything has a use. So you can see I'm being a little bit more, like I say, free with my strokes. I don't have to, be as cautious with how hard I'm pressing. And that's exactly why I try and keep these blades, because I find they do come in useful. And I'll probably keep switching between these two until that one, the newest one, starts to go a little bit blunt, and then this one will get replaced with that one. If you want to know a bit more about slice tools, I've got videos over on my YouTube channel, testing out some different tools, testing out some different blades, showing you what they're like, what they work well for, what they don't work well for. So if you're interested in buying any, have a watch of that first. It might just give you a few tips. I've also got a discount code, so you can, even if you're UK or US, you can get 10% off, and that will be sort of in the description of each video. So if you do want to purchase anything, make sure you use that code and then save yourself 10%. Once I've put this layer in, I'm probably going to go in with a different tool and a different blade. It's just one, instead of having a pointed edge, it's going to have a curved edge, and that's going to add those sort of final top highlights. We've got a few minutes left in this video now. I'll try and get these last highlights in just in the time we've got left, and then it'll probably be the first video we've actually hit the goal that I set out to do, which was to finish just this area down here. Like I keep saying, I'm absolutely terrible at trying to judge how long things are going to take me, because I get really distracted. I'll sort of end up working on a different area. I'll spend too long on one thing. So this is a slightly different slice blade where the end's just curved. So it gives you a thicker line, but it also gives you a brighter line. So this, when I did my, I don't know if you've seen my tiger piece that I've just recently completed before this one. That was done, all the highlights on that were done using these bigger tools, because it was such a big piece, it gave, they came into their own because they were thicker, they gave thicker lines and thicker tools. You just have to be careful that you don't, like I say, go overboard with this one. When you're putting in these highlights, you don't want to put them absolutely everywhere. I'm looking at my reference photo, so I can see that this sort of it might be hard for you to see on camera, but you'd probably be able to see it with your own reference photos. I can see that almost there's a line of highlight that sort of, it's brighter towards the nostril than it is sort of down here. So down here I'm going to probably go in again with my X-Acto style blade. Instead of using this one that I'm using now. So I'll probably leave it there for this one. Obviously we'll come back in and we'll highlight up all this area. We'll sort of establish some of these darker spots again that we may have sort of like gone over when we were putting the highlights in. So we'll go back in with some India ink or one of the Faber-Castell pens. We'll darken them up, and then all we've got left to do is work on this eye, this nose, and down this side of this guy's face. Also need to just sort of work a little bit on the inside of this guy's eye, touch up the whole piece, and then we should be finished. Probably, fingers crossed, hopefully get most of that done in the next video. Like I say, I'm absolutely terrible at predicting time. So like I say, fingers crossed we'll get it done, but I can't guarantee it. So I hope you've enjoyed this one, and I'll see you again in the next video.